Wednesday evening, everybody, and welcome to our conversation series with real topics, real people, and real conversations. My name is Becca Mowry, and I'm here with Brian, and we're really excited to be here because we're launching into a two-part series that we're affectionately calling Couples in Quarantine. So I think you came up with that, didn't you?
Yeah, I think
You're
so.
very creative.
Thank
You're
you.
very
Thank you.
But this will be a two-part series where we really want to mine for wisdom in our relationships, and we want to grow stronger together as couples. So, like I said, it's a two-part series, and both weeks we are going to be joined by a wonderful couple, Greg and Shelley Diedrich.
Hey.
We're so excited you guys are here. Thank you for being with us. If you don't know Greg and Shelley, they are the founders of Iron Bell Ministries in Louisville, Kentucky, your home base, and they are phenomenal marriage coaches. And so we're just really excited to glean from their wisdom over these next couple weeks. So tonight, we're really going to be launching into and looking into some of the unique challenges in this season of quarantine, as well as discussing some ways to maybe adopt some healthy rhythms in our relationships. And the next week, we're going to get really practical and talk about growing strong as couples, growing strong in our relationships together. And they're going to give us great resources and some exercises to do as well. So we'll talk about that next week. But I know that whenever we've talked about marriage coaching, you guys do a whole weekend together with couples, and we have about 25 minutes tonight, so we're just going to launch right into that if that's okay. And Shelley, maybe I can start with you.
Yes.
What are some of the challenges that you're facing and that you see couples facing in this unique season, and maybe what does it look like to walk through this season together as a couple?
Well, sitting right here, the four of us are two couples. We have totally different, environments. Greg and I have an empty nest, and so it's just Greg and I. And I'm getting to see a lot of him, and he's getting to see a lot of me. And so, we have different challenges than you guys would be. You're in the homeschooling, right?
Yes.
And all of that, so your life looks a lot different,
Yep.
and your challenges are different. But I would say, whenever we do marriage coaching, the first thing we hit right off the top is personalities. And we say the thing that you fell in love with about your spouse is the thing that is absolutely driving you nuts as you go on in life and marriage.
You're looking at me when you're saying
Yes,
that.
and so,
Affectionately, Greg.
Yes,
Just
yes.
affection.
And you'd be surprised that, our temperaments, how little we really understand what a major part they play in everything in our life, whether it's our marriage, parenting, workers, your boss, whatever, to really understand those temperaments. And now we're inside our homes with all of these personalities going on, that it's getting, magnified, and we're bumping into each other in major ways. And if you don't really understand what's going on or why it's happening, then it causes tremendous conflict.
Right.
So that's something I wanted to, talk about right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of like what some of those temperaments are?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be you, but
Yeah.
it could be another couple or something like that.
Well, and this is, we do, a couple hours on this when we actually do a weekend thing. But really quick, if you say four major temperaments, you've got that outgoing temperament, very happy, very positive. Then the opposite is somebody who's serious and quiet.
Yep.
Then you have someone who wants to take charge and be, in control. And then you have another personality that's kind of laid back and easygoing. And so if you've got a guy like Greg, who not only has he been running companies and, instructing people what to do, and he's very driven. You take that temperament and you put it inside four walls of a home, and he starts wanting to control. And since I'm the only one there, that's me, control me, and get his list. And he's looking for something to do. They want to be productive. What do
Clean
we,
the storage room.
And I'm like, okay, I can hang with you for a couple hours because I'm that laid back, and I'm like, you're choking me with your list to do, and he's all, let's go, and I'm like, okay, I'll give you a little bit of my time. You have somebody who like is that melancholy, that serious personality in the marriage that really needs a schedule, needs predictability, needs some quiet, needs some alone time. And if their schedule is too demanding and they're on call all the time, they literally are beyond overwhelmed.
Yeah, exhausted.
And
just
exactly,
exhausted
yeah.
in the
It's
season.
just they're like, there's no way out.
Yes.
And and then you have the person that's kind of happy and upbeat that wants, to bring the life. And sometimes the serious person's saying, okay, could you turn it down a little bit? It's a little too much. His nickname is Sparky. And so, we
Sounds like a dog, doesn't
That's right, Sparky. We've done a lot of counseling on that, but you know what? I can just say, okay, Sparky, and he knows exactly what to do.
Ah, yeah.
It
Tone
means
it down.
he's getting a little too happy for me, and I'm like, I've had enough a little bit, so just,
Yeah.
I need a little quiet.
Yeah.
But, that's a really quick snapshot, but if those on steroids right now, and if you don't realize how to give that person the quiet, or how to help that person that wants to be productive and in control,
Yeah.
to tame that down and give the person that needs a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
And so really you can kind of
Yeah.
steer it much better.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for you to talk about. I think one of the things that, that you don't have a lot of time in, or a lot of in this time, is just emotional energy.
Right.
It gets worn down over time, right? And so how do maybe talk a little bit about how introverts and extroverts giving people their time to recharge?
Well, if you understand that one that's more quiet and needs some we call it to fill up your emotional tank. We all fill up our emotional tank different ways. And the quiet person really does need some alone time. So I think in your marriage is to honor that. Honor that is a major part of who they are. And literally, if they don't get it, they are miserable, they make you miserable. So somewhere in your day, or however you can kind of work it out and say, I know you need that space, and hey, I've got this morning at 9 to noon, but I don't have,
Yeah.
I really feel free to go take that. If you have the person that is waking up every day with the list and wants to be, like, we've cleaned everything in our house. We've done the garage and the basement and the closets, and we've just done everything.
My sock drawer is very
I mean, and he's been a very happy camper because he's all about
Yes,
that, and I've
yes.
been obliging. But there's times I've had to put the brakes on and say, you know what, tomorrow I can't. I'm off. I can't do it. It's just, I've been with you, but I'm really getting worn out.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
One example I was going to share of a couple we've coached, a young couple,
Yeah.
and they, in this time frame, he's still having to go to work, and he's also going to school at night online, and that's still going on. He's
Right.
getting a degree, and she is a teacher, and she's used to being out every day teaching. She's not. She's doing some Zoom teaching, but she's home. She's an extrovert. He's an introvert. He comes home exhausted and has to go do school, right?
Right.
She's been home all the day, right? Waiting for him to come home, and he's like,
talk.
"Oh no, here she comes!"
Yes.
Not because he's not happy to see her, because he has nothing
Yeah.
left in his tank.
Yes.
Yeah.
So navigating through that, hey, how do you give him some? I know it's the opposite. It seems selfish, and right now they're both jealous of each other in a sense,
Right.
because he wishes he had her schedule, and she wishes
Yes.
that she had his schedule. But neither one of them are really getting what they need, and so understanding that and supporting one another through that is absolutely critical.
I think it's amazing too, just the fundamental principle that we're different,
Yeah.
and that's okay. What we've seen even in our short years of working with some couples is that people begin to fault each other for their differences, and
Yes.
because they're different, they're wrong.
Right.
That's right.
And what I love the way that you guys are speaking about this, because it's recognizing and identifying differences in the way that God made us.
Yeah,
He made
right.
us
Honoring
different,
them.
and He made us complementary, and recognizing those, and then honoring that, investing in finding out more about that, and honoring that.
Absolutely critical to
really
that.
good.
Yeah. Otherwise, what happens is a part two. We'll talk about conflict.
Right.
It
Yeah.
feels like you're trying to change the person,
Right.
the way they are designed
Yeah.
and wired, and no one wants to feel like they're being remade. They want to be loved and accepted for
Right.
who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of us try to remake each other.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, absolutely.
What about you, Greg? As far as what are some a different challenge maybe that we're facing in this world right now?
I think a couple things. One is that there's a whole piece of being together that raises things that you didn't know were there, right? You become aware of things that maybe
Yes.
they're on the periphery, but now they become front and center,
Yeah,
right?
you have the
Some of
time to
those-
think about them.
Exactly, and they're in front of you. And I think for many of us, that becomes then this thing of, oh my goodness, we have this issue, right? And what I would say is every marriage has flat spots, right? Every marriage has opportunities for development. I would view this as a gift, right? To say, okay, what's coming to mind is some areas where we need to work through. We need to reconnect, because this is not, working well for us in this season. And that's a gift. And what often happens in relationships, what definitely happens in relationships, scientifically even, is that relationships start off really attuned to one another, and you build emotional intimacy. And what happens then is what's called life, right? Yeah. You get married, you have children, somebody's doing the soccer, run, and somebody else is doing the piano lesson, and then somebody's homeschooling this age. And what happens is your relationship can devolve from an emotional one into a functional one.
Right.
And that is the natural evolution of every relationship. So it takes energy. And so I would just say, view it as a gift to say, okay, there's some things we need to work through.
Right.
And these are things that we want to get better at, and identify those. Don't waste the opportunity to say, okay, you know something, we're noticing some things here that we want to take note of, all right? In this season, I've been pushing, Shelley too hard to do some things. She's realizing now that downtime serves her well. When we go back, let's not go back to as busy of a schedule for the two of us. I can do some of my things on my own that I enjoy, but our together schedule needs to have more space for her. I need to honor her in that rather than dragging her into that. And so identifying that and then saying, let's work on that, rather than just ignore it or try to grit our teeth and bear it as we go through this time of
I love the way,
quarantine.
like you said, to really pay attention to what's happening in your relationship.
Yes.
And maybe write it down. It's like, he's pushing my buttons. What am I? What is that? What is about that? And and then and then when you have time, because right now there's not a lot of time, especially those that are home with their children, to work or really get in on those issues, but to be aware of them so that you can go see someone that can help you. Because I always say that when our marriage went through a really, really horrible time, I remember saying, you know what? I believe you're the God that you will do what you say you will do. And I need to stand on that promise. And that you, even though it's hard, I think what happens is that when our differences, I think there's a lot of marriages that already have been very, very difficult. And this is probably, they're coming out of it thinking, we're going the opposite way. I can't take this.
Right.
But as Christians, we have that hope, and we have that supernatural power that can come in, and the Holy Spirit can really do a work. But we have to partner with that. And I think what made our marriage successful, one of the reasons we said yes to God, we decided to partner even though we didn't want to. And
that's key.
It
I
is
think
key.
You should say that again.
Yeah, I mean, we said yes to
really
it. We said yes to the journey, and the journey's hard, and we had to do our part. And I'm just saying, when you say yes to God, there's only one way you're going to come out of that, and that's in victory. Because He doesn't know how to do anything else but that.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage the couples that are like, okay, this is, we're not going to make it.
Yeah.
You can, and you will. And I think that's a main ingredient. So pay attention to what this is right now, and then decide to, partner with the Lord and each other and getting some help.
Yes.
Yeah, next session we'll talk a little bit more about some of those resources and ways to help. But I think to Shelley's point, just starting to pay attention to those things and realize that many of them come from just the way we're wired differently. And to honor that in the other person. Become a student again of your spouse. One of the things that happens is that we get married, when we're courting, we're learning all about the other person, right? We're learning about them, what they like, and this and that. And then we kind of get married, and we stop learning about our spouse, and we think we know them.
Right.
But things change. Our spouses change, right? Our time of life changes. And so being always an avid learner about that and understanding, what we're going through now and what's it take for us to be successful now. And this is a major turning point, right? This COVID virus has definitely thrust us in a different situation. So I would encourage us just to stay as learners of our spouses, honor who they are, and then ask, what you need to do to contribute differently to the relationship in this season, rather than demand what your spouse needs to do differently in the relationship in this season, right? And if each person does that and is surrendered, as Shelley said, God will start to work that in each of them.
I think what you said too is so key, and we've talked about this a lot, because I don't think it's not intuitive for people to know that if you're not growing together, you're growing apart.
Right.
And that we naturally will fall into that kind of survival mode
Right.
and just going on with life rather than growing in intimacy together. And
Right.
that takes intentionality, awareness,
Right.
investment,
Yes.
Yeah.
and hope. Like you said, Shelley, I love that.
Yeah, and I think, the second thing is expectations. That we, then the second thing that we hit hard is we go around with needs, but we haven't told our spouse what those are. We
Yes.
assume they know.
Yeah.
Greg has worked a long day at the office. Maybe he's been out of town, let's say, in the past, a couple nights or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, surely he's going to come home tonight. He hasn't seen the kids, and we haven't had dinner, and and I'm assuming that he's thinking that. Well,
Right.
I haven't said that to him.
Yeah.
And I think even where we are now in the quarantine is verbalize your need,
Yes.
because don't assume that they are seeing it, hearing it, and that's big. And then you can
Yes.
talk about it. Hey, tomorrow I was hoping that I'd get some time alone. Do you mind if I go for a walk? I'm really feeling like, man, I've reached my limit.
Right.
Him saying, wow, why don't we tackle this tomorrow? I'd really like to do that. Are you with me? Do you think you can give me that time? So I know what he's expecting, when I'm expecting. You can talk about it and can say, yeah, I'm in. No, I'm not. Okay, could we do it another time? Communication's huge.
Yeah.
And when we don't say it, then we're just like, we get mad at each other.
Yes.
And then we're thinking, well, surely you knew I needed that.
Right.
And then I'm mad
Right.
at him because he didn't recognize it.
Resentment builds
Right.
up.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah.
And
So-
everybody thinks their spouse should be a mind reader.
Yes.
And
Yes.
nobody is.
Yes, we
Yes.
just need to stop that. We need to stop it. We
Yeah.
need to stop it.
Eliminate
Stop
it.
assuming that our spouse knows
Right.
how to read our minds. Communicate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's good.
So
I think
expecta-
too, and the that we don't have reactionary marriages where we're actually have some intentionality and planning in it.
Right.
Because whenever we're reacting, a lot of times it doesn't end up
Yeah.
in the best place we want it.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Then we're apologizing
Right. Exactly.
for our reactions.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you hit on a really good point, intentionality, because in most marriages, this drifting that happens, I once heard somebody say, 1 degree apart over a couple of years is a long way apart.
Yeah.
Right? And I think what happens is no one intends to do that.
Yeah.
No one sets
Right.
out to say, boy, I can't wait till we grow apart.
Right.
No one does
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But
It's in their vows.
It's
Yeah.
mindlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
just not being intentional
Right.
about a relationship. It takes, just like anything, if you're going to become a good piano player,
Yep.
if you're
Yep.
going to become a good
Absolutely.
preacher,
Yep.
it takes focus, effort, and attention. So do thriving relationships.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So this whole notion of being intentional, just because we're spending more time together, doesn't mean that's growth.
Right.
Right.
Okay? That could even be detrimental, as
Right.
some couples have found. So I think being very intentional about, we want to make this relationship better. What's it going to take for me to contribute to a better relationship?
Yeah.
And the other person saying that is a very big step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that forces you through this mindlessness
Yes.
to say, wait
Yeah.
a minute, I'm going to be thoughtful, intentional, and I'm going to invest in having
Yeah.
a relationship
Yes.
that's different.
Yeah.
And I think too, with the investing, it's not going to feel natural to have that conversation at first. I remember
No.
the first time we did something like that, and there was a marriage exercise, and it said, like, write down 5 things that you love about your spouse. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I was just, it was very uncomfortable for us to say, because we
Yes.
didn't talk like that to each other all the
Right.
time.
Right.
Like, this is what
Yes.
I love about you.
Yeah.
Right?
You just don't really
I thought
naturally.
you just knew. Don't
I
you
know,
just
I
know?
Well, there
sorry,
were so
you're gonna say
many.
something.
It
Do I
was
have to
hard
tell you again?
Where do I start?
Right. Yes.
But recognizing it might be uncomfortable
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
first when you
Yes.
start talking, but it's okay. 'cause
Yeah.
It
you're
is.
investing.
And I would say most of the things that we encountered were very uncomfortable. And we're going to talk a little bit more the next time about conflict and some things that exercises that we had to practice to know how to navigate through conflict because we didn't do it well. And it was very uncomfortable. But the more
Yeah.
you do it, the more natural. And then it's just like the air you breathe. You see
Yeah.
the fruit of it. You see
Yeah.
how the marriage is thriving. And you're like, okay, so it takes to be very
Yeah.
intentional.
Another great thing she raised earlier, she mentioned the name Sparky, right? Which is a funny name. And I think if you can take some of these spots that feel like they could be points of pain or conflict
Tension, yeah.
and turn them into some humor.
Right.
Okay? We've done the work to know where, our tension spots are.
Yep.
And we've given permission to each other to even make some humorous notes about
Right.
this,
Yes.
right? So Sparky came out of that. And so by saying that to me, she can say, okay, Sparky,
Yeah.
we kind of smile and laugh
Yeah.
rather than, hey, would you cut that out? You're being a little too overbearing or over the
Right.
top, right?
Right.
That's a totally different thing. And so now we kind of almost can laugh about it,
Right.
And we can
Yeah.
do it in a way where it doesn't cause conflict. It's just as a way we know, okay, we've been down this road.
Yes.
We have shorthand. We know we've worked through it. We
Yeah.
have patience and love for each other.
Yeah.
So now that cuts through. So humor then, in a way, almost becomes your friend
Yeah.
to kind of help you through some of those tough spots.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you gotta know where they are and work through them to be able to get there.
So you guys mentioned earlier that, you know, you have adult children, we have young children
Yes.
in the house. So our scenario might be a little bit different than yours, where you're saying, "Wow, too much of Sparky,"
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and we're in a position where we're like, "Man, we haven't had time alone. Like
Yeah.
our kids." Is it okay to say, like,
Yeah.
they're like up to like 11, you know, at night. Like, this
At
is
late.
crazy, you know, and
Yeah.
we're playing board games and enjoying
We're
that.
having fun,
Yeah.
But then the us time kind of
Yeah.
got, and so we had to identify that and change. But there have been some unique challenges
Yeah.
there. I think for me too, and this might be one that people don't necessarily point to right away, but it's very important, is that, you know, God established relationships on purpose, and they're not just for us. They're for Him, right? And so I think any thriving marriage is really about the Lord. And so every marriage should have a mission. Every relationship should have a mission. So now all of a sudden life like this all happens.
Right.
And whether your mission was to serve the Lord together or it was just to parent the kids or whatever,
Right.
now your mission has been completely turned upside down.
Right.
And you're in this season, you're trying to work it out. And I would bet that it'd probably be worth our time going back to the drawing board and saying, what's our mission
Yeah.
right now in this season? Particularly like a real drawn out, like, this is what our plan is in this moment in our marriage. I know for us, just a quick thing, I shared this on a Sunday, is that we felt like our mission right now is to encourage other people.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people who just need encouragement. And so we put a plan together on how we're doing that,
Yeah.
right? And it kind of flipped things around for us, where it gave us purpose.
Right.
It gave us something to do together, and our family too.
Yeah.
And it's a good example for our kids too, seeing
Yeah.
Yes.
us as a
Yeah.
couple work together and how we want to bless people and
Yeah.
the vision of that. It's
Yeah.
great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we have just a few, these are going to fly by because there's so much to talk about, but
Yeah.
I did want to hit, you know, what wisdom would you give couples in this moment about establishing good rhythms and good boundaries,
Yeah.
and just be kind of in a healthy place there? Is there anything either one of you want to say into
You
that?
know, obviously we know it's the Lord first. It's the marriage right under that.
Yeah.
And the kids, I think some kind of structure, you've got to be intentional. And that was the
Yeah.
word that you used, to leave time for the emotional intimacy for each other. So, yeah, I know everybody's having a free-for-all and enjoying all that. But as we can see, we're kind of creatures. We do need, even me who likes little structure, I need some structure.
Yeah.
Making sure that you kind of get into a rhythm and a time where even if you have teenagers, they're in their room, they're quiet and they're on their way to bed, so you two or us can have some time. You've got to be intentional to carve it in there.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency to just let the kids stay up, whatever.
Yes.
But I
Yeah.
think they don't really do well with that either. They need structure. They want boundaries. And I think those boundaries for the marriage, to make sure that's being fed and there's time for that every day if you can,
Yeah.
and that the kids know that.
Yes.
That's one thing I'd say.
Yeah, and then we'll talk more about this next week, but really understanding where and how do you feel the most connected to your spouse? Make a note of that, and then do
Yes.
those
Yeah.
things.
Explore that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Explore that, right? So it might be, I know we'll talk about this, but Shelley and I, when we're just the two of us having coffee with no electronic equipment around,
Yeah.
TVs, phones, iPads, and we're just talking and sharing hearts, I know that that's going to create an emotional bond between us.
Yes.
Right.
And so we have to be intentional about that, even if it's just 20 minutes, right? And so that first 20 goes to God, and then the second 20 can go to your
Yeah.
spouse, right?
Yeah.
So,
Second 20, I like
there
that.
you-
Oh,
hey,
hey.
maybe we have a new program.
I like
Yeah,
that a lot.
yeah,
That's
that's
good.
great.
Second
Yeah.
20.
There you go.
I also found too that when you're connecting in that area. It's easier to forgive. You have a
Yes.
lot more
Oh,
grace
yes.
for one another.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, you laugh together a lot more. For me, I parent better.
Yep.
You know, if things are tense between us, I'm a terrible mom.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything is
Yelling
out
at
of
my
kilter.
kids and
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
it's-
true.
yeah.
Absolutely.
A couple more things. I wondered if you guys might just share kind of personally when your relationship is just thriving. It's in that zone. Like what's a part of that? Like
Yeah.
what would you identify as the things that really contribute to a thriving marriage?
The ingredients.
Yes,
I can see
dear.
it's coming.
Yes, dear.
Yes, dear. And I say,
That-
that's right.
That's right.
That's it. That's the answer.
That
That's
is
it.
that's thriving right there.
What would you say?
Well, I'll let you go.
No, you go.
Oh, okay. I would say that when we're attentive to
Yeah.
the love languages and the needs of the other person,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Yes.
when we can, when I know that Shelley's love language is quality time, and where she's not asking me to sit down for coffee, where
Yes.
I'm saying,
Yes.
hey, can you grab a cup of coffee? Let's sit down. You know,
Yeah.
I'm inviting her into the thing that I know
Yeah.
will feed her even more than me. That creates, you know, an incredible, you know, bond between the two of us. Or she'll say, hey, do you want to go listen to some live music tonight or something, which we do occasionally. But she's entering into my world saying, hey, I know you love that.
Yeah.
Let's go do that. But it's when you know that person and you know what creates the bond between you, and then you're
Serving that.
initiating it and serving them in that, it doesn't get any better than that, right?
Yeah.
And I feel great when I see the way she responds to that.
Yes.
Right.
And it's not just her being selfish. It's like I get pleasure out of,
Yes.
wow, I see that really fed her, and that obviously creates a very different dynamic for us.
And obviously, we're down to probably minutes.
It's okay.
But there's a thing in John Gottman's book that we use two marriage books by John Gottman, and one is Relationship Cure, and the other is the 7 Principles of Making a Successful Marriage. I think you guys have the resources for your people. But bids is one, and basically it's needs. And we'll hopefully talk about that next week. But when I make a bid or a need and he serves me in that, it just makes you feel more loved
Yes.
and valued. Why? And I just want to do it back to him. It's kind of what you were
Yes.
talking about a minute ago. And bids are huge, which create emotional intimacy in a marriage.
Yeah.
Main ingredient. And so I think we're thriving when our bids are being stated and met.
I'll give you a little example because that's kind of a concept we threw in there at the end,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
could talk a long time about it. But I think every couple can relate to some version of this, right?
Yeah.
You know, Shelley tends to get in bed first. I don't know how. I'm very quick, but somehow
Oh,
she
no, you're
ends,
not.
She ends up fast.
Should I
into
tell
bed.
them your routine?
No,
No.
that's okay.
We don't have time for that.
Yeah, we don't have time. You're running over. And so, anyways, inevitably, she'll get into bed first, and then I'll just about sit down, and she'll say, "Oh, I left my cup of water in the kitchen."
Right.
Okay, now every guy and every spouse, I should say, knows translated that means.
Go get it.
Would you go get me my cup
Yes.
of coffee in the kitchen, right?
Or
Or
water.
I was going to take an Advil. I did yoga today. I was going to take an Advil. I forgot to take an Advil. Oh, would you go get? And when
That's great.
when I can just say, you know, yeah, I'll be happy to, and I bring them back with a little glass of water, and then I'll smile. Is there anything else before I sit down again in bed?
Yes.
You know, and then there's humor in it.
Yeah.
Then there is just such a tenderness
Yeah.
Yes.
that
Yeah.
comes out of that interchange
Yeah.
versus if I were to say, go get them yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
you know where they are. Or didn't this happen last night?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Doesn't this
Doesn't
happen
the
every
water
night?
what
always
everyone
come to bed
loves.
with you?
Yeah.
You know, where I could make a point and be right.
Yeah.
But instead, when I don't and I enter into that, it creates all kinds of
Yeah.
you know,
Turning towards.
connection
Yeah.
between us.
Rightness doesn't
awesome.
necessarily equate to intimacy in a
In
relationship.
fact,
No,
most
it
of the
goes the other
time,
way.
I can attest to this. It means the opposite. Yeah.
Well, we have a lot more to talk
Yes.
about, and so I'm going to encourage everyone to tune in next week. We're going to keep the conversation going, and I'm actually going to challenge you this week to talk to your spouse, talk to that person you're in a dating relationship with, whoever it might be, and ask them, you know, what feeds you? Maybe you've never even had that conversation, and do some work between now and the next time when we get together. And next Tuesday, we're really going to do some practical teaching, give some wisdom practically into how to invest in your relationship. And we're also going to hit some of those common potholes that any relationship could hit, and how to face them. So I want to encourage you to spend some time maybe with your spouse, just beginning to even write out what an intentional plan would look like for you to invest in your marriage right now, in your relationship right now. And come with that, and then come with pen and paper next Tuesday night, because we want to give you some real practical tools in how to invest in your relationship. So,
And if
thank you.
Shelley and I
Yeah.
are still married, we'll be here as well.
Yes, we're hoping you'll be here next Tuesday. We'll see. But thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you guys,
Yes.
and
Good to see you guys.
we will see you next Tuesday at 7.